Hey, how's it going? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be doing a video where I'm going to be letting you know about some books that I thought that I was going to hate, but I ended up loving. I have made a video like this once on my channel before, so I will have the previous time that I've done this linked down below, but I love when I'm able to recommend books that I went into thinking that I probably wasn't going to like them, and that's usually for one reason or another. Like maybe it has a trope that I don't typically enjoy, or maybe the plot just doesn't sound really interesting to me, or maybe I've read that author before and I wasn't really a fan of their books before, but then this book was really special. And I think that's the main reason why I continue to pick up books that I think maybe I won't like, because sometimes this happens and I get really surprised and a book ends up completely shocking me. And so I have a list of about 15-ish books that I thought that I wasn't going to like that I ended up really loving and that I was completely wrong about. But before we do jump into the books, I just wanted to take a second to thank a new sponsor on this channel, and that is Warby Parker. You might have noticed these adorable new glasses that I'm wearing, and that is thanks to Warby Parker. Warby Parker was founded with a mission to inspire and impact the world with vision, purpose, and style. What I love about Warby Parker is that they make vision care so simple and so accessible. You know, I've been wearing glasses ever since I was a kid, and I think sometimes it can be really hard to find a pair of glasses that work for you, but I love that with Warby Parker, not only do they have lots of stores across the US and Canada, but they also do have an online store that was very helpful because they do have the virtual try-on available where you can see how these glasses are going to actually look on your face, because you never know how the different styles and the different colors are going to look on your specific face. So I really liked being able to do the virtual try-on to try and find the perfect pair of glasses for me. Their glasses start at $95 with prescription lenses that include anti-reflective and scratch-resistant coatings. They have free shipping and free 30-day returns. You can use your vision insurance or FSA. And my absolute favorite thing about Warby Parker is their buy a pair, give a pair program. And basically what that means is for every pair of eyeglasses that they sell, a pair of eyeglasses is distributed to someone in need, which is such a wonderful thing. I really love when a brand gives back. I think the frames that I picked out are absolutely adorable, and I can't wait to wear these all the time. Honestly, there's no better feeling than getting a new pair of glasses. Like, I feel so stylish. So you can explore my picks at the link down below in the description, and you'll receive free shipping and free 30-day returns. Thank you so much to Warby Parker for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get into the book recommendations. Alright, so kicking off the list of books that I thought that I wasn't really gonna like, that I ended up loving, is this one called Someone You Can Build a Nest In. This is a book that I actually only read because of my friend Gavin. We were actually doing like a collaboration video series, and this was Gavin's pick. And if it were up to me, I probably never would have read this on my own. So like, thanks to my friend Gavin for making me read this one. But I really thought that this book was not going to be my thing, mostly because it's been described as like a fantasy book, and I'm just not really much of a fantasy reader myself. But I feel like the reason why this book ended up working for me so much is because this book, in my opinion, has the perfect balance of not only like fantasy, but also some truly dark horror moments and romance. There's a sapphic romance in this book that is literally so cute, like one of my favorite things that I've ever read. And this book is basically a romance between this one character who's a shapeshifter and then this female woman who kind of like takes care of her and like nurses her back to health. Honestly, there was a lot of things about this book that reminded me of Shrek, which I know is like such a random thing to want to compare this to, but there were some elements of this book that did remind me a lot of Shrek, which was actually really great because Shrek is like one of my favorite movies ever. The romance in this book was so unbelievably cute. The writing was so good. There were some really gory horror moments in this book. It almost has this like dark fairy tale vibe to this book that just really worked for me. I definitely agree with this one blurb on the back that says that this book is the coziest, most unexpectedly wholesome love story about a monster who devours humans and wears their bones that I've ever read. Next book on this list has got to be Big Swiss, because this is a book that for some reason I had convinced myself that I wasn't gonna like this. I think it's mostly because I was hearing some negative reviews from like some friends who had read the book, but I ended up reading this one day and I just loved this like so much more than I thought I was going to. And this book is definitely really weird, and it is one of those books that I kind of struggle to recommend this book myself because it is so strange, because the characters can be a little bit messy, a little bit annoying at times, and they're not the most likable. And the plot of this book also feels very random, and it's more of like a slice of life type of story. There is just something about this book that was so incredibly fascinating to me, like so much to the point where like I would reread this book because of how much I loved it. And in this story, we're following this woman named Greta, and her job is that she transcribes these therapy sessions with this guy who's a sex coach. And so all of his therapy sessions are, you know, very vulgar, and they're discussing a lot of, you know, taboo things. But it's so fascinating because this story is kind of about how this woman Greta starts to become obsessed with one of his patients, and it's this woman who refers to herself as being called Big Swiss. And this is definitely one of those like obsession stories where like it's just about a woman getting obsessed with another woman. And that's like one of my favorite things to read about for some reason. Like, it was just so interesting. This is the kind of book where like I found it hard to put down, like I couldn't look away. The audiobook was also very good because it's a full cast audiobook. A romance book that I really wasn't sure if I was gonna like or not is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. And this was mainly because I'm not a big fan of like the second chance romance trope. Just in general, like I just don't really enjoy romances where like the couple's already been established and we're kind of reading about a point in their lives where they're gonna be like getting back together. And especially in a situation like this where like in this story you're following this couple who was married previously and they have 2 children together, and then this story is kind of about how they're like starting to come back to each other and like getting over all of the trauma that happened in their lives. You know, usually in a romance book that is not what I'm seeking out or like not what I'm reaching for, so I really thought that I wasn't gonna like this very much. But I think the main reason why this one worked for me so much is because we do get some flashback chapters that kind of show like how this couple got together in the first place, and I think that's something that's always missing for me from a second chance romance. Like I want to see the early days of the relationship, like I want to see how they began in the first place, and I love that this book had a lot of those elements, but also because this book was so emotionally moving. These characters had truly gone through so much, and it was actually just really beautiful to like see these characters overcome all of these hard things that they've gone through. And I think this book reminded me that I can enjoy a second chance romance, and this really like changed my perspective on second chance romance books, because after reading this one I was more likely to pick up other second chance romance books that I also ended up loving so much. Both of these books were also 5-star books for me that were second chance romance books, and I don't know if I ever would have picked up these books if it hadn't been for this one that I loved so much. Another book that I thought for sure that I was gonna hate is actually The Haunting of Hill House. I'm not usually a big fan of classics, and like almost all of the time when I go to read a classic, most of the time I end up feeling disappointed. I don't know why that is. I do desperately want to be a classics girly so bad, but I just don't think it's ever gonna happen for me. And this is one that I went into thinking that I wasn't gonna like it because I am such a huge fan of the TV show The Haunting of Hill House, the Mike Flanagan TV show. It's one of my all-time favorites. I've rewatched it so many times. And so by the time I was reading this book, you know, I had heard from so many people that like, oh my god, the book is so different from the show, so like don't go in with those kinds of expectations. And so I didn't. I knew the book was gonna be very different, but I actually really liked the book for what it was. And the book is very different from the show. Like they are almost completely different. Like it's almost not even the same story, but I loved the writing in this. Like Shirley Jackson's writing was actually so good. You know, for a book that came out in 1959, I wasn't expecting it to feel so timeless. This feels like something that could have been published recently. I just felt really attached to the characters in this, and I really loved the overall like creepy atmosphere in this book. I just thought it was really well done. And then another classic that I wanted to mention is actually Little Women. This is another situation where I picked up this book and I was like, oh my god, because not only is it so long, but because I did not have the best luck with a lot of classics that I was trying to read, I was so convinced that Little Women was just going to be another one that like I wouldn't understand the hype for and that I wouldn't be able to get into, but that could not be more incorrect. Little Women ended up being one of my favorite books that I've ever read. I ended up reading this book shortly after I saw the Little Women Greta Gerwig adaptation in theaters because I love that movie so much. Like it was really like a life-changing film for me to see, and I related to Jo March so much, like one of my most relatable characters of all time. And so I knew after watching that movie that I had to read the book, and I was so excited to read this book and get those same exact feelings. I think that adaptation was just so well done because it gave me the exact same feelings that I had while I was reading the book. And I thought the writing in this book was absolutely gorgeous. Like I cannot believe how much Louisa May Alcott, she seems like she was one of those people that was like so ahead of her time and just such an iconic person. And after reading this book, it really made me do like a deep dive into the author's history as well. It was such a great reading experience that I will never forget. I actually do have an entire reading vlog where I read this book for the first time, so I can have that link down below if you missed it. One of the horror books that I was not expecting to love as much as I did has got to be Daphne by Josh Malerman. And I know you're probably thinking, why did you think you wouldn't like that? Because Josh Malerman is like maybe my top favorite horror author. And like, yes, that's true. But the reason why I wanted to put this book on this list anyway is because almost DNF'd after the first 50 pages. I think this is definitely one of those books that you really have to be like in the right mindset for, because the writing style in this book is definitely something, and I think it takes like a minute to adjust to the writing style. Because in this story, you're following this young girl named Kit that is on this like high school basketball team, and with the girls' basketball team, there's this myth about this woman or this creature named Daphne. It's almost like a thing where like if you say her name, then she appears. And Daphne is like this really creepy, like 7 feet tall, grungy looking thing with like hair over her face. Daphne's like a scary ass creature. The reason why I DNF'd this one though pretty early on is because I just wasn't really vibing with the writing style. I was finding it to be very hard to get into and like a little bit repetitive at the beginning. But oh my gosh, once I pushed through that initial feeling of like wanting to DNF, I loved this. Like this ended up being a 5-star, and it also ended up being in my top 10 of that year when I read it. I think Josh Malerman is such an incredible horror author because I feel like he's able to use horror as a metaphor for like real life things. Because in this book especially, you're dealing with this young girl named Kit who is dealing with a lot of anxiety as she's growing up. And I feel like the way that this book talks about that specific anxiety, like the fear of growing up and getting older, oh my gosh, I connected to this so much because it's almost like this Daphne figure is almost like a metaphor for the anxiety that this character is experiencing, and I just thought that was handled and done so well in this book. The next book that I have on this list is one that is so incredibly random. It's this nonfiction book that's called The Comfort of Crows. This is a book that I never would have picked up on my own. Actually, I only ended up reading this book because I was doing a video series where I was reading all of Reese Witherspoon's book club picks for that year. And this is a nonfiction book that when I picked it up, I was like, okay, why would I care? I don't care about crows. Like, no offense, I'm not a big birds person. I would never read a nonfiction book that's about birds, but this book was so weirdly comforting. I don't know how to explain it. This was like one of those nonfiction books that kind of like makes you think about your life, you know, like it makes you think about the seasons of your life and all of the change that you're going to go through and how to deal with change in your life that makes you uncomfortable. Oh my gosh, there was just such a big takeaway from this, and I loved my experience of reading this book so much. Like, I highly recommend listening to the audiobook. And there's also some really great illustrations and like photos from what I remember included in the physical copy of this book as well. But this book, not that it gave me the same feeling as when I read Wild by Cheryl Strayed, but that's like the one that I can think to compare it to. Like, if you're looking for something nonfiction that's gonna like inspire you and like make you feel good about life and like really make you reflect on your own life, this is definitely one of those books that I would highly recommend. I just thought it was so surprising. I really didn't think I was gonna like this, and then I thought it was so beautiful, and I give it like 4.5 stars. One romance book that I read that I absolutely loved was Ready or Not. And with this book, I would also like to talk about Out on a Limb, because both of these books, I went into them thinking that I wasn't gonna like them for the same exact reason. And that is that both of these books involve a character who has like an unexpected pregnancy. And you know, not only is that something that I just don't really care about reading, I mean, it's mostly because I don't plan to ever have any children of my own. I don't really care to read about pregnancy, and especially like an unexpected pregnancy, because sometimes I feel like that can lead to like a woman feeling trapped or like being stuck in a relationship that she doesn't want. And so usually that's something that I don't really love reading about. But in both of these books, Out on a Limb and Ready or Not, these are my favorite examples that I've ever seen of like a woman getting pregnant unexpectedly and then the romance that follows. Because in Ready or Not, the reason why I love it so much is because the romance is not even between her and the father of the baby. The romance is actually between her and this guy named Shep, who's her closest friend's brother. And then there's almost like a love triangle kind of situation between this guy Shep and then the father of the baby. Oh my god, this book was just so good. It was so cute. And like, Shep is one of my favorite love interests that I've ever read in a book. Like, he is the definition of a golden retriever cinnamon roll. Like, one of the sweetest male love interests that I've ever read in a book. And this book just had me giddy. It had me laughing and smiling the entire time I was reading it. Like, they were genuinely so cute. And then same thing with Out on a Limb. This is another one that ends up with this girl getting pregnant after a one-night stand. But then it's about how she and this guy who got her pregnant, they just decide that they're gonna figure it out. And both of the characters in this romance book, they have very unique disabilities. And they were both disabilities that I had never read about in a book before. But oh my gosh, when I say that this is the most wholesome, non-toxic couple that I've ever read in my life, like, they were literally so cute. And I listened to this entire audiobook in like one afternoon, and I was just smiling and laughing and crying. It just made me feel all of the things. And Out on a Limb is so good. It is so worthy of any hype that you might have heard about it. Another romance that I just read actually very recently that I wasn't expecting to love as much as I did is Daddy Issues. And this is mostly because the first book that I read from this author was the one called You Again, and that was a book that was really, really popular, but I actually DNF'd that one. I didn't really care for it. And so going into this one, I was a little bit nervous because I was like, oh god, like maybe we're gonna have the same thing. And then also, like, this book actually does have some really low average ratings on Goodreads, so I was kind of worried that like maybe this wasn't gonna be any good. But I loved this book so much, and I immediately connected to Sam's character. You know, Sam is this 26-year-old woman who is just really struggling with her life. She's feeling a little bit directionless. She's still living with her mom, and this is a romance about how she starts to get involved with this guy who's her neighbor, and he's also a single father. But what I found to be so refreshing about this girl and this character is that she doesn't really like children, and she doesn't really want to have children of her own. And I don't think I've ever seen that explored before in a romance where like she's dating a single father. And I just loved how honest and like refreshing of a character she was. And I just thought the romance was so well written in this book. Like, it was genuinely so cute. It gave me all the fuzzy feelings. And then speaking of romance, another very, very recent read of mine, this was like in the month of March that I read, is this romantasy book called Shot in the Dark. This is a book that I had very low expectations for when I went into it because, you know, as I've said, I'm not a big fantasy reader, and I don't really typically love romantasy either, even though I'm more likely to enjoy romantasy as opposed to just fantasy. But this is the first ever romantasy book that I've ever given 5 stars to. Like, I loved this so much. And I think the main reason why I ended up loving this one as much as I did is because we have these two characters named Cliff and John, and both of these characters hunt monsters. They're basically like Sam and Dean on Supernatural. And then it's about how these two hunters get involved with this woman named Sylvia, who is a fairy. She's literally tiny, okay? She's the size of like Tinkerbell. I really didn't think I was gonna like this one either because I've never really read any books that involve fairies, especially not teeny tiny little fairies. But this book had me me dying. Like, they were literally so cute. And I think something that I really loved about this book is it kind of has that like fish out of water trope, you know, because she's a fairy who's never been around humans before, and because they're humans who have never really been around fairies before, it's like they're both learning a lot about each other in a way that was just like really cute. It was just so surprisingly wholesome and like really sweet, and I really loved the connection that John and Sylvia had. But I also at the same time, like, I loved Cliff as a side character in this book. He was definitely reminding me so much of Dean Winchester on Supernatural. Like, he just had that like comedic timing, and he also just has really great banter with the other guy, John, who's a lot more like Sam. This book was just so much fun, and if you're a fan of Supernatural, I highly recommend. Another book that I thought that I really wasn't gonna like and I ended up loving it so much is Deep Cuts. And this is mainly for a few different reasons. I mean, the first biggest thing is that I was gonna DNF this book after the first like 50 to 60 pages because I found the beginning of this to be so incredibly cringy. There were just a few things happening that I thought were so ridiculous. Like, there was a moment where this main character like comforts one of the other main characters by literally saying Fleetwood Mac lyrics out loud. And I just thought that was the most cringy thing I had ever seen in my life. Like, I get that song lyrics can be comforting, but to actually like directly quote it from the song, I don't know, it was so cringe I had to look away. I also just really wasn't sure if I was gonna like this because I feel like in comparison, you know, with any other books that I've read that have a huge music factor in them, like Daisy Jones and the Six, or anything kind of similar to that, I feel like I've always given those books around 3 stars. I usually think that the books are good, but I never really love them. But there was something about the writing in this book. Oh my gosh, I loved the way that this book talked about music, especially in the second half. Oh my gosh, I was underlining so many things and connecting with so many things. And I especially appreciate the conversation in this book about pop music specifically, because I hate how sometimes people are just always so dismissive of pop music and they act like it's not as impactful or as important as other genres of music. But I loved the way that this book wrote about pop music. I also loved the early 2000s vibes of this book and the way that we're following these characters who are such passionate songwriters. It was all something that I really connected to. I just really loved Percy as a main character in this book. Like, I loved her story, and I think that's why the second half of this book ended up working for me so much, because it really is a character story about Percy and like her growth over time as a character, and I just really loved the exploration of that in this. I also ended up really loving this book that's called Seduction Theory, and this is one that I was not sure if it was gonna be my thing, mostly because the Goodreads reviews scared the crap out of me, because this book has like a 3.0 out of 5, or like something really low at the time that I read it, and I guess I was just really afraid that this was gonna be one of those like literary fiction books that would go like right over my head, or maybe I would find it to be so pretentious. But after reading this, I love this book so much, and I really don't understand the low ratings for this one, because this book, in my opinion, it had the perfect amount of like messy romance that I really enjoy. And I thought this story was actually incredibly unique too. Like, I've never read anything quite like this, because in this story you're following these two characters who are both professors at a university and they're married to each other, and everybody thinks that their marriage is so perfect and so amazing until the guy Ethan, who's like the husband in the marriage, he ends up sleeping with this woman, and it says that she's the department administrative assistant named Abigail. But what I found to be so interesting about this book is that you're reading from the couple's perspective, like you're reading about Ethan and his wife's perspective, but you're also reading about this woman's thesis that is one of their students. So there's this woman named Robbie that the wife Simone has been getting really close to, and so she's really getting close to this woman named Robbie who's not only one of her students, but she doesn't know that Robbie is writing like a fictionalized version of their marriage for her thesis. It kind of sounds confusing when I pitch it like that, but this was so unique and so cool. I think the reason why this book worked for me so much is because this book is so messy and dramatic and none of the characters are likable, but it's one of those books where you really can't look away. And I think why I loved it so much is because the writing was so unique, because since you have this student who's writing this thesis about their marriage, you never really know when you're reading the truth. It's like, am I actually reading from their perspective, like, and this is what actually happened, or am I only reading the student's interpretation of what they believed happened? I just thought the writing in this was so brilliant and so weird. And then jumping into a few like thriller and horror things. The first one is Party of Liars by Kelsey Cox, and this is mostly due to shallow reasons because I absolutely hate this book cover. Like, this is one of the ugliest book covers that I've ever seen in my life, and I hate everything about it. And I'm so jealous that the UK got such a beautiful cover of this book, by the way. Like, are you kidding me? But besides the book cover, I was also worried about the synopsis of this book because the main premise of this book is revolving around this 16-year-old girl's birthday party in Texas. And so I was just curious, like, I wasn't sure if this book was gonna be my thing or not, but I ended up loving this so much. Like, this was a 5-star thriller for me. I highly recommend this book for fans of The Hunting Wives, because I think if you liked that book, this book just has like the same exact vibes from The Hunting Wives. You follow so many different perspectives in this book, and I thought all of them were so interesting. And I love that it's all taking place on the night of this girl's 16th birthday party, but that you are getting flashbacks, like seeing things like leading leading up to this party. There's even a little bit of like a ghost story that's mentioned throughout the book that I thought was so cool. Like I love anytime thrillers have like just a little dabble of horror in them. And for the most part, I just had such a fun time with this. Like all of the characters are unlikable. They're so messy, they're so ridiculous, but like there was something about it. I could not pull my eyes away from the page, and I finished this entire book in one afternoon. Another thriller that absolutely shocked me is Julie Chan is Dead. You know, I'm so glad that I read this because for a while I was not even sure if this was one that I wanted to read. This book involves twins, and I am just so tired of the twin trope in thrillers. It's just really something that I find to be so repetitive, and I feel like I've seen it all before. So I'm not the biggest fan of thrillers that involve twins, but also because this is a book that follows this character who's an influencer, that's another thing that like sometimes I just don't really care to follow from that perspective because I find it to be a little bit cringy or a little bit over the top. And so because this book had both of those things, I was so convinced that I wasn't gonna like this, but I loved this book from the very first page. Like I was obsessed with this. I know I've raved about this book over and over and over again. This is genuinely like one of my favorite thrillers that I've ever read because it's so ridiculous, it's so over the top, but it also has so much commentary about like influencer culture in general. And I love how this book feels like it has an equal balance of like thriller and then also horror. And this is definitely one of those books where I found it so hard to put down because I thought the writing was so addicting. And you have no idea how excited it makes me that this is this author's debut book. Like I cannot wait to see what this author does next. And then lastly, another book that I wanted to mention is going to be Hunted by Darcy Coates. I had read so many Darcy Coates books in the past, and most of the time I do find her books to be a little bit disappointing or just like not for me. But I think I've come to discover that with Darcy Coates, the books that I don't usually like from her are the ones that are like her haunted house stories. For some reason, I find them all to be like so repetitive and so boring. But I think I've come to discover that the Darcy Coates books that I do like are anything that are not set in a haunted house, because I also did really like her book that was called Dead of Winter, and that was another like really fun like winter atmosphere type of thriller, picking them off one by one kind of a situation. I really liked that one too, but this one also really surprised me. I think this one was really great for me too because you're following this story about this woman who like disappears in the woods, and there's really good like forest and like woods atmosphere in this book. But then I also love that you're following multiple different perspectives in this, and one of the perspectives that you're following is from this guy who's kind of like this creepy stalker who thinks that he can like save her when he's going out into the wilderness trying to find her. I don't know, that perspective in particular was so entertaining to read in this book. And this one just really surprised me because it had a lot of elements in horror that I really love that I wasn't expecting. Darcy Coates is one of those horror authors that has so many books, and I've always been so put off from like wanting to read books from her because I kept having the same experience over and over and over again. So it felt really good to find a book from this author that I really enjoyed. All right, those are all of the books that I have for this video today. I would love to know if you've read any of the books mentioned in this video. Please do let me know your thoughts on them. And I would also love to know your answers if there are any books out there that you thought you wouldn't really like, or maybe you thought about DNFing and then you ended up loving it so much. Like I would love to know if that's ever happened to you, and like which books did it happen to you with. Please let me know all of the details down in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye!